All right, y'all, let's move over to the NFL. The annual owners meeting included several proposed changes to the Rooney Rule, which requires NFL teams to interview minority candidates for vacant head coaching positions. Some resolutions were tabled, such as draft pick incentivization for minority hires. However, starting this year, teams will have to interview minorities for coordinator positions in addition to head coaching jobs, will not be allowed to deny opportunities for assistants to interview with other teams for certain jobs, and the NFL will be ramping up coaching workshops and opportunities for minority candidates. So, Drake, should the NFL expand the rule further, or should they just scrap it all together?
If a black guy went and he could be just, and I'm gonna say black because I only know about black. I'm not Indian. I'm not Arab. I don't know about the other minority groups. I can only speak for African Americans. But if a black guy went to Amazon, went to Jeff Bezos and said, "Hey man, I want to be your CFO. Look at my resume. I'm more qualified to be your CFO." And Jeff Bezos said, "Man, get your ass out of my office." Like that would be the end of it. That would be the end. You know why? Because that's Jeff Bezos' organization to do whatever he wants to do with it. At the end of the day, I say that to say this. At the end of the day, I appreciate Roger Goodell trying to, gain some ground on this. I appreciate what the NFL is trying to do. You have 32 billionaire owners. Each team is a business. So for you to think that you're going to tell a CEO, a chairman, however they look at themselves, how to run their business, good luck. Good luck with that. At the end of the day, we was talking about this earlier, and I know you're going to get these numbers. I don't think, per se, when I talk to other African Americans and I get their view on this, it's not the head coaching numbers that's the problem with the Rooney Rule. I think, if you actually average out, the head coaches are pretty decent. It's the GMs. It's the owner. Well, here's the deal. Ownership don't have a term to it. You're an owner until you're not. So until we get more, minority owners, more minority GMs, then and only then would the numbers might, pan out to the mass numbers of the players, of the employees. Because that's the problem here. You see this big number of minority employees that's somewhere in the 80 and 90% percentile, and then you look at the head coaching numbers, and then you look at the GM numbers, then you look at the owner numbers, and now you're like, this doesn't add up. Well, at the end of the day, you cannot tell someone how to run their business. Like the NFL could come out here and say, "Hey, we'll give you a first round pick." Oh, thanks. I'm good though. Because if that was the case, Colin Kaepernick could be playing in the NFL right now. It's a number of reasons why he's not playing, but if you remember, they tried to make this a big race thing, and the owner's like, "Yep, we hear you, man. Yeah. You sure?" He still ain't he's still not in the NFL. So for all that stuff that they talk, these billionaires know this is my business. You're not going to tell me how to run my business. I'm going to go with who I feel comfortable with, whether his skin color is pale white or whether it's dark midnight black. I don't care. That employee will go off what I set forward to him. You're not going to tell me who I can hire, who I can't hire. So it's cute that the revision says they have to do something. That's nice. That's cool. But unless you're there in the interview process with them, good luck, because they can do whatever they want to. So my view of this is this. Until we get more minorities in the decision-making chain, this is what we got to deal with. It is what it is. One day it might get better. One day it might not. But listen, we can control what we can control, and this is not one of them. So I guess Roger Goodell got his work cut off for him as far as I look at it.
Yeah, in answering the question, I guess I would have to leave to scrapping it, and not because I don't think more black coaches are deserving, because I think Eric Bieniemy is a great example. When you look at previous offensive coordinators for Andy Reid, we've seen Doug Peterson win a Super Bowl. We've seen Matt Nagy have, he won a division year before last season. So, I mean, it would stand to reason that that's a bad look optically for the NFL, because Eric Bieniemy hasn't been able to get a head coaching position for 2 straight years, and including this offseason coming off a Super Bowl. But your point about GM, your general managers, is absolutely right. There are no well, there's a few. I know Andrew Berry just got hired for the Cleveland Browns, so there's a few, but by and large, I mean, as you go up the ladder of hierarchy in the NFL, it's more and more white than minority.
There's
And
two. There's two GMs that are
two
minorities.
GMs, okay. And then there are no black owners or no minority owners, right? And that's where it comes into. And Drink's absolutely right. They got. I mean, when you're the owner of something, you got the right to run it however you want. And we've seen like Cleveland, for example, last season. They could have hired. I mean, anybody would have been better than Freddie Kitchens probably. Like they could have stood the reason to hire a minority coach, and they chose not to. But that's just kind of the way it goes. I brought this up earlier, and I'll say it again. The best thing the NFL would be able to do, it got to start from the top. And if there's another Jerry Richardson ownership thing that happens, that Roger Goodell, NFL league office, put out an ad somewhere to say, hey, wanted minority group by this NFL team. This is how we fix this and try to make it, I don't know, a little bit more equitable. But it's got to start from the top, because if I'm a white owner in the NFL and let's say I got a head coaching vacancy, and I bring in, let's say I interview 5 people, I got my one minority candidate to comply with the Rooney Rule, and I got 4, white candidates. I mean, it stands to reason that probably none of them are unqualified. They probably all can do the job with varying levels of success, but they're probably all qualified. There's probably not some bum just walking around like, why are you even here? So at the end of the day, it would probably stand to reason that I'm going to hire somebody I'm more comfortable with. And more often than not, it's probably going to be somebody that looks like me. That's that's kind of just the way I see it. So it's got to come from the top. There's got to be an ownership change to where you get either a black person or a black group that can make those decisions. Until then, I mean, it's just kind of like the NFL is trying, but it's not really having an effect. This rule's been in effect since 2003, I believe. And I mean, we're talking about today, there's 4 minority head coaches. And now that doesn't seem really good. But just a couple years ago, I believe that was doubled to about 8. And we got to think about this. Vance Joseph, Steve Wilkes, Marvin Lewis, Hugh Jackson. Let's break these down. Marvin Lewis, it was just his time to go. His time in Cincinnati had just run its course, and you can make arguments that he should have been gone years ago. Hugh Jackson, I mean, I'm sorry. I don't care what color you are, but if you go 1-31 over 2 years, I mean, what do you want? You can't, for the sake of equality, you can't be that bad or have a record that's bad and stand to keep your job. It's just not going to happen. Steve Wilkes got kind of screwed because Arizona was a mess that year, and then it just kind of was what it was. And then Vance Joseph just wasn't very good. I mean, let's be honest. We can go back and look at that. So you had 8, but it dwindles down to 4. And I mean, it's unfortunate, but you can't just make those teams hire another minority coach just to keep, so everybody feels better about themselves in terms of equality. And now I'll get to the point about all these incentives that they're proposing to kind of entice teams to maybe take it more seriously, because I think we can all probably, I think it's a safe assumption that these interview requirements, they're just bringing a guy in, they're interviewing him for the sake of being in compliance with the rule, but they probably don't have an intention of going that route. They're just doing it to, all right, well, we check this box. All right, let's get serious now. But the incentive pieces with draft picks and whatever else is being thrown around, I told Drink this earlier. I think no matter who you are, the one thing you want, you just want a fair and equal hiring process. Line up resumes, and the best man should get the job. But now when you talk about incentives and draft pick positions, I mean, that's not really helping, because I mean, you're setting a condition to kind of artificially level the playing field. But now if you got a black coach and a white coach that are, of equal, we think they got equal resumes, equal interviews, all these things, and a draft pick incentive is the tiebreaker, how is that an equal playing field? I don't think it is.
Yeah, this topic is pretty. The more I dug into the numbers, the more interesting it become. Just to answer on the owner's note real quick, Shad Khan, Pakistani American, and Kim Pegula, the Bills
Okay.
co-owner, as Asian Americans. That's the only two minority owners, and one's a co-owner. But when you talk about this topic, you have to answer a few questions before you can begin to identify a solution. And first of all, we have to ask, well, what is a target for your diverse, fair, inclusive league? I mean, you can tell me, oh, it just needs to be this, needs to be that, but like we need to have some sort of like goalpost, right? So you start with the census data, which tells you 76% of the country is white, and then 12.5% is black, 13.5% is Hispanic, and then of course the rest of your minorities are, well, they're the rest. So logically, you would expect about 24% of your head coaches, your coordinators, and your management positions to be minorities. But as of today, 4 NFL head coaches are minorities. It's Tomlin, Rivera, Lynn, and Flores are about 12.5%. There's 12 coordinators, 2 offensive, 10 defensive, which is 18.75%. And then you have your 2 general managers we talked about earlier, or 6%. So for reference to the NFL league office does employ 28% minorities in their overall, operations. So, the data first tells you the NFL is close in some regards, especially in terms of coordinators, somewhat close in terms of coaching, or we're getting there. Because you have to remember, out of 32, if you go to 5 or 6, you're quickly approaching, your 24% goal. And then, from a purely mathematical standpoint, now they do fail pretty obviously when it comes to general manager positions. But then you have to factor in, okay, well, 60 to 70% of players are minorities in the NFL. So is that your goal? Does being a former player matter more? Of 9 of only 32 NFL head coaches have had NFL playing experience. But then there's greats like, Andy Reid and Bill Belichick, or even guys like Kyle Shanahan, who's gotten the Super Bowl, who never played a down in the NFL. The NBA has a similar breakdown. They had just 10 of 30 coaches having played in the league. But you could also flip that argument on its head and say critics like to point out that the NHL and the MLB, who are primarily white still, 22 of 31 NHL coaches and 22 of 29 MLB managers did play. So, in those white-dominated sports, you actually have a higher proportion of players to coaches versus the NFL and NBA is kind of the opposite. But overall, I think when you talk about coaching in terms of comparison to being a player, it's hard to say, oh, there's definitely a link of if you were a player, you were a better coach or a better manager. I mean, we just got talking about Michael Jordan for 30 minutes. What's he done with the Bobcats or the Hornets or whoever they are this week? I mean, it's, you know what I mean? It's hard to sell that you would say, oh, well, you have to be a player to be a good coach or vice versa. So, you get to the question, okay, well, then what is wrong? And like you said, you were talking about the breakdown, Jay. I don't think it's that minority coaches are getting an unfair shake in terms of when they get the jobs. In 2018, those 5 were fired. In 2019, only Ron Rivera he got another job right away. So I think that the one thing you could point to is you say, when you look at single season firings, 3 of the last 11 in a single, as in you got one season, you were canned. 3 of the last 11 have been minorities, which is disproportionate to how many there are hired. And also 29% of white coaches get a second head coaching job recently, while just 8% of minority coaches get a second head coaching job. And that's, again, you're working on a small sample size with minority coaches to date. But, when I talk about the solution, I think it goes back to a lot of it, to me, is part of the system of becoming a NFL head coach or becoming an NFL offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. You're climbing that ladder. You're starting in your 20s. You're becoming an assistant at some smaller school or a college, and then you work your way up to a positional coach and then a coordinator. But then you do it all again when you go to college, and you do it all again when you go to the NFL, and you're constantly working up the ladder. And I think that getting those positions can be harder when black coaches probably aren't given the best opportunities in the lower ranks and then move up. Oftentimes getting a job may just be who you know, or being in the right place at the right time. And if you're denied those opportunities at the lower levels, it's going to be hard to rise to the ranks of where you're going to be pulled from. Because let's be honest, if you are an NFL head coach, you were probably an offensive or defensive coordinator in the NFL. It's not often. I mean, like Matt Rule, is an outlier of late that got straight from college, or like Cliff Kingsbury.
Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah, okay, yeah, again, but every year there's maybe one of those hires versus the majority of these guys, they're positional coaches and they're coordinators, then they're head coaches. So I think that that's one place you could kind of focus your efforts. But yeah, overall, like you said, Jay, I would hate to think that I was one of these coaches going in for an interview where I was being asked about a job just because of my skin color or just to be a quota or a check in the box. I don't think that the answer is so much to force the solution by rules that you have to do X or Y. Because like you said, Drink, at the end of the day, these teams don't do what they want to do. These owners don't do what they want to do. Like if they got their guy in mind, they know that's their guy, they're going to do what they got to do to get him, right? But you can fix the system that brings these guys up to the ranks. You can create better opportunities to start with. And I think that you would get a lot closer to your target of, your demographics based off your total population versus what you see in the NFL.
Yeah. So to that point, you're bringing up, and I think it's a good discussion to have. The NFL, what is their goal? Because I don't think they have a goal right now. It's just throwing something at the wall.
Right.
Diversity, diversity, diversity. But there is no target. Now the numbers you bring up and you talk about 24%, 25%, whatever it is, that's where they just were a couple years ago. So, I mean, in terms of you're going with the census data.
Right.
It doesn't look right when you talk about the makeup of the players, because we know the makeup of the players is a vast majority of players are minority players. But at the end of the day, the NFL can have whatever vision, whatever goal they want to, and Roger can bring all the owners in, 30 white ones and 2 minority ones. Say, hey, yeah, this is what we're trying to do up here. 30 white owners gonna look at him like, okay, that's cool. Yep. Well, look, whatever the owner's goal is, whether it's to make money or win games, they're going to do what they want to do.
Right. So I think we're all in agreement that there is a problem. It's just this rule probably isn't the best way to go about fixing it.